So you've got player A makes century percent and player B makes century percent. Well, what do these mean? Well, basically, one of the nice things about a snooker frame and pricing up the centuries is players are only going to make a century in frames they win. I don't think there's ever been a game of snooker played where somebody made a century and lost. If they did, it would be a very interesting frame to watch because of all the snookers that one of the players would have to have got. Basically, this is per frame one, how likely they are to make a century. These figures here, the default here is 8%, which is actually quite low. The best players tend to be somewhere up around 12-13%, and the highest ones this season, Robertson, obviously with his 100 centuries, he's close to 20% actually, and Ronnie O'Sullivan, although he's played less frames this season, he's pretty close to 20% as well. So they'd be the two that get the highest percentage. So anyway, let's just have a look at some of the prices. So with these values of 8% here in this best of 9 match, you have that both the players are only 21% to win the match bet, and the tie is highly likely at 59%. If you think that's just because these numbers are quite low, suppose it's a close match, it ends up 5-4. You're still only going to have played 9 frames, and at 8%, you're not even going to have expected 1 century. So there's a very good chance of neither player getting a century, and hence the 59% here. So if I made the match longer again, the tie is less likely, simply because there's more room for the players to move away from one another. So here then, you obviously, because they're both still 8%, you get the same price for both players, but the tie now is 39%, so it's not odds on anymore. So let's just go back to our best of 9 then, and I'm going to make these guys higher as well, so I'm going to make them both at 13%. I've got this calibrated in 0.5% now, but if that's not enough, then somebody let me know, and we can make it more granular if that's needed. So at 13% here, obviously still a pick 'em, both these players the same price, but the tie now is odds against in the best of 9, simply because there's more chance of at least one of them getting away from one and getting away from each other, basically. So you can play with different variations of these, and this is where there might be some value in this. So suppose we've got a match where I'm going to put it 55. So I think quite strongly that player A is going to win. He's 62% here against 38 for the match. But perhaps, although player B isn't favourite for the match, when he gets in, he's just a great break builder, so put him at 16. And so this comes back quite close to pick'em again here, because although he's likely to win more frames, player B gets more centuries in the frames that he does win. So if I make him a bit further, make him up at 17, and make this guy really not very good at centuries. Now player B, despite being underdog for the match, he's quite a strong favourite relative to the other player for the century match bet. So one other thing to take into consideration with these century percents, actually, it's not actually always about how good players are at making breaks. It's their actual desire to get the hundreds, because it's quite interesting where players, when they get to about 80 points, generally they've won the frame, so they don't have to get 100. And so some players like Robertson, going for his 100 hundreds this season, he's trying his hardest on every ball to get the 100, whereas other players seem less interested in getting to the 100 once they've got to the frame one. So obviously that will be reflected in the stats, and if you do look up these stats, you can probably look on snooker blogs and snooker stats sites, and you should hopefully be able to get these out of those places to get the genuine numbers. And obviously you can add your own feel to that. So somebody might have a 13% general rate of getting centuries, but you think he's on bad form lately, you might drop him down to 10, or he seems to be improving, he's a young player, you might actually want to put him up at 15 or 16. And the nice thing is you can make an opinion on something that's quite intuitive to understand here. This percent of frames with a century to get, you know, out these prices that you know, hopefully sit in the market, and you know, you might find some value there. It's, I think, particularly for a situation like this, you know, one player better than the other in terms of winning frames, but far worse on this. I'm not sure how anybody can get to, you know, these numbers through their own intuition. So this pragmatic model gets you there, and you know, there's no guarantee the model's perfect, but you know, if you use this time and time again, you'll learn to know where its weaknesses are, and you know, that's just part of trading with any models like this. Whoever's built them, they're not perfect for every situation, because you're watching the match and, you know, one player seems to be playing really badly, or, you know, one player seems to be playing, you know, on fire. So you basically get these numbers to have a play with, basically. So we can also put in the value of the 100 so far. So for example here, let me reset this again now, and you look at a couple of scenarios just to check that the pricing seems to be doing what it should do. So let's make it so it's best of 9. Well, let's make it 4-1 to player A, but let's put player B 1 ahead on the centuries. So if you look here, the model's already realised that player A cannot win the match bet on the centuries, because he can only win 1 more frame, and he can't get 2 centuries in that 1 frame, so therefore he just can't win. The tie price here is 7%, and that's because in that 1 frame he wins, he might get a century. This figure is less than the 8%, if you see, because the other guy might get more centuries in frames before he wins the final one, or indeed he might not win that final frame. So we go to another scenario of 4-4, and there's 1 frame to come here. They're both 50% to win it, and so of the 50% that player A wins, he's got an 8% chance, and so as you see, the tie here is 4%, as you'd expect. Another scenario, actually, so we'll leave him at 4, but we'll put player B, we'll put him to 3. So now when it's 3-1 and he's 1 behind, he can win it, but look, it's very long odds, because he has to win both his frames with, you know, quite an unlikely event. So the century match bet here is up at 220. Player B, you know, quite a strong favourite, and then, you know, there's a small chance of the tie. He's got 2 chances to get 1. So that's basically what we do with the centuries, and that's pretty much the model in its simplest sense. There's one more thing that we can talk about now, which is this advanced trading variable here, which is the kick-on. So I'm going to reset this model one more time back to 50-50, and then I'm just going to have a play around with this. Now, what this variable is trying to do, it's going to take into account what the score is. So if it's positive, it means that the player that's ahead is going to kick on. He's going to you know, move, his frame win percentage increases with how many frames ahead he is, and so the more frames ahead he is, the more, you know, he gets an incentive. And don't worry too much about the magnitude of this. You know, you can just get a feel for which of these numbers to use, but I think it moves, each of these numbers will move 0.5% per frame ahead or behind. So -2 means that for every frame ahead you would lose 1% of your win probability. +2 means that you'd move on 1% for every frame you were ahead. So what should this number be set to? Well, when it's set to 0, it is just like the match is the toss of a coin, just a toss of a coin, toss of a coin, toss of a coin. Maybe not a 50-50 coin, but the same coin every time. So, you know, 53-47 or 55-45, whichever number you put in to the win frame percent here. So why do we potentially need this kick on bounce back? So I think a good example here in this best of 9 is to put a player 1-0 up. If you look here, he's gone pretty short for this match, and as I said, if every frame is 50-50, this would be the right price. However, matches tend to have this kind of elastic around them, that they get kind of close to where they're supposed to be. And so at the moment, I think the best value for this kick on bounce back is about -2. Just moves it back a little bit. So again, if a player's 2-0 up now, he's up at 76% with the -2, whereas he's 77 with the 0. So that's one for you to play with. I'm not going to lay down the law and say, you know, this is definitely right. It's all about your own feel for each match, and you know, if you do get to learn how to use that nicely, again, it will probably improve certainly this correct score, and you know, look into the future better than perhaps using the 0 value. So basically, that's all the different ways that you can find some value with this. You know, you can, just to recap, you might be able to find better percentages, so you get a better starting price, a better pre-match price, and early match price. You might just read the frames really well in running, and so with this slider you can react to the current frame better than other people. Or you might just have better percentages for these. You might look at statistical databases or whatever, or just have a feel for it, or a combination of both of those factors. So I would say have a play and see if you enjoy the model, and if you've got any feedback or any new markets you want added or anything like that, then let me know. One thing I will just say now is that the Century prices is just for the match at the moment. I'm having some problem with the conversion to the web page, actually, with the individual player breaks, but hopefully I'll figure that out in the next few weeks or whatever, and be able to add those markets in. And so I think I'll leave it there, but yeah, have a play, and if you've got any feedback, then let me know. So thanks for listening.